Older people of Reddit, what was the equivalent of teaching your grandparents to use the internet when you were growing up? My father, born 1922, told me his grandfather refused to believe in radios, he figured someone was pulling his leg. My grandma was born in 1925. She once told me that her fourth-grade teacher told the class that in the future you'd be able to talk to a person across long distances while seeing them at the same time. My grandma vividly remembers thinking that it was the dumbest thing she'd ever heard. We speak through FaceTime regularly now. My great-grandmother was born in 1900. She was in her late 90s when this happened. One day while visiting her in the nursing home, my mom asked me to call home to remind my dad to put dinner in the oven. My great-grandmother saw me use my brick of a cell phone and wanted to know what it was. I explained and her face just lit up. So you could be grocery shopping and call home to ask your husband what he wants for dinner? She asked. She thought this was just fantastic. Then she asked if she could try. She called my great-aunt, her daughter, on my cell and regaled her about the marvels of modern technology. It was so cute. Great-grandma was a month away from her 102nd birthday when she died. She lived long enough to cuddle my son, her first great-great-grandchild. She was a cool lady. I miss her. My grandma is 86 and although she had a cell phone since the early 2000s, she never really used it and always used the landline. Last year, her old cell phone died and we got her an iPhone thinking that it'll likely stay the drawer. Imagine our surprise when we started receiving group iMessages from her with photos of her garden. She figured out how to do that all on her own, even the speech-to-text function. She has Parkinson's and it really helps. So I showed her FaceTime and she was over the moon. Now it's video calls all the time. I never thought she would get to grips with that thing, but sure as hell am I glad she did. Debit cards. Like, how to actually pay by card and withdraw at an ATM. Law. When my mother passed away in June 2018, I realized my dad had no idea how to use his debit cards because my mother handled everything like that. We had to go to an ATM to actually practice taking cash out, and then go into a shop to practice using the card to pay for things. He was totally blown away and after using contactless to pay for some newspapers exclaimed, "My God. It's so easy." The shopkeeper could barely conceal her laugh. I remember when San Diego Trust and Savings first got ATM machines. People would only use them during banking hours. So they changed all their signs, brochures and ads to rename themselves San Diego 24/7 Trust and Savings. Big campaign on TV. I remember seeing people stand in line to use the ATM machine in the mornings and not even try using it until the bank's opening hour. My lovely grandma used her microwave for one thing only, heating water. It was adorable. She also only used email once. Her message to me: "Your dad made me do this. I'll never be the same again. Love, Grandma." Ha ha ha, that's a funny sense of humor though. Sounds like the kind of jokes we make now. Here's a really old one. My dad, who would be 102 if he were still alive, grew up on a farm. When his dad got their first tractor, he couldn't figure out the manual shifter, so he would make my dad sit on his knee and shift gears for him while he drove. Family legend has it that my farmer granddad, still with us, in his 90s now, tried to stop his first tractor by shouting, "Whoa," at it, like he would with his draft horse. The tractor, obviously, ignored him entirely, and granddad and the machine ended up in the canal. Reportedly that was a common problem for pretty much everyone when automobile manufacturers would do test drives as a publicity thing. Kind of explains why brake controls on early cars were hand levers on the outside of the car. Horseless carriage. Plus with the speeds at the time, hand throttle and braking made sense. Why would you need to control it with your feet? My grandmother, born 1888, never learned to drive and always referred to my grandfather's car as the machine. My grandmother is 89 and she's talked about how her mother, my great-grandmother, learned to drive and went and got her driver's license. The next day my great-grandfather went and bought a new car and she never drove again as she was afraid to wreck the new car. What amazes me the most about that story is that as I understand it, he went out and bought the new car without even mentioning it to her. I think the transition is that I, 60ish, have noticed is that I expect technology to change. I expect an iPhone with new features. I am bummed about the lack of jetpacks, but otherwise technology keeps delivering wonder. But without a manual, so you have to figure each device out. My parents didn't expect the changes. They had trouble adapting. The pace of change has accelerated. 3 of my grandparents were born before the first airplane flight and 3 of them watched men walk on the moon. I see a new car feature and bitch about its imperfections. I so wish that this had more upvotes. I, 23, have this conversation with my grandmother, 70s, all the time. Being born in the 90s meant that as I was growing up, technology was advancing so rapidly but also with less physical changes. It's all slightly upgraded versions of the same stuff. As she was growing up and in the workforce, there was time leading up to the new items and not everyone had access to them instantly. It was a choice to upgrade and learn the new tech, not necessarily an absolute necessity for her. That said, she's a smart lady and when I push her to learn something she does. She's my favorite person to text when she's not sending me articles about crimes in NYC and berating my parents for allowing me to live alone in such a dangerous place. When I was around 12, my parents got my grandparents a cassette player. This was not new technology by any means, but my nana and granddad had only ever listened to the radio or records, so it was new to them. My parents gave them some tapes to listen to. I think I may even have made them a mixtape of some of their old favorites. But when they first plugged the cassette player in, my grandparents just turned it on, pressed play, with no tape inside, and watched the little wheels turn. It was like magic to them. They were so delighted by the whole thing. Ah, that's actually really cute though. The wonders of modern technology, bringing you the electric motor. The microwave. There was a while there old people thought it was a high-tech magic box that if you pressed the wrong buttons could alter space-time forever and blow up the universe. I have a friend whose parents are in their early 60s and they refuse to get a microwave because they think it will give them cancer because radiation. When my husband and I lived with his parents for a while, I had to use my microwave in the bedroom because my mill was terrified of having it in the kitchen. To be fair, when microwave ovens came out, we were told not to stand too close to them as the radiation could be dangerous. My mom is in her 70s now and everything about technology confounds her. As a kid, I showed her how to turn on the TV with the remote and how to use the VCR. She would still get confused which remote was for which. As a teenager, I showed her how to type on the word processor. But she couldn't get it and asked me to type things for her. In my 20s, it was how to go online and use the World Wide Web. She thought it was a fad and a waste to learn about it. In my life 30s, it was social media. She reacted like Kathy Bates in Waterboy. My dad constantly buys my mom the latest technology. She has an iPhone 11, a Fitbit, and an Apple Watch, and she has no clue how to use any of it. I wish my dad would stop buying her tech.